In a realm painted with the golden hues of eternal sunlight, nestled between whispering woods and singing streams, there lived a princess named Elara. Her kingdom, Ethelgood, was a marvel of peace and prosperity, but a shadow was slowly creeping over its borders. A mysterious, silent mist had begun to rise from the forgotten northern marshes, a mist that stole the color from everything it touched, leaving behind a world of grey and silence. The flowers drooped, the rivers grew quiet, and a heavy sadness settled in the hearts of the people. Elara's father, the wise King Theron, had consulted every sage and scholar in the land. They spoke of an ancient prophecy. Only a royal heart, pure and unwavering, could find the Sunstone, a legendary gem said to hold the warmth of 1,000 suns, powerful enough to dispel the encroaching grey. The stone was hidden deep within the treacherous Shadowfen Mountains, a place no one had returned from. One evening, as Elara looked out from her balcony at the greying kingdom, a small, unassuming man with kind eyes approached her. He was Elias, the royal gardener, known more for his quiet work with the roses than for his words. He told her a story his grandfather had told him, a story not found in any royal scroll. It spoke not of a single hero, but of a journey of simple, moment-by-moment choices. The path to the Sunstone, he said softly, is not found on any map. It reveals itself only to those who walk in simple faith, one step at a time, listening to the quiet guidance that wells up from within. He handed her a small, smooth river stone. "The path will not always be clear, princess," he said. "When you feel lost, hold this. Don't try to see the whole journey. Just look for the very next step, the very next right thing to do. Trust that it will be shown to you, and then simply do it." His words resonated with a truth Elara had never found in the grand prophecies. She felt a flicker of hope, not in her own strength, but in the simplicity of this idea. Trust and then act. The next morning, leaving behind her royal attire for a simple traveler's cloak, she slipped out of the castle. She didn't have a map, a grand plan, or a royal escort. All she had was the gardener's river stone and his quiet advice. Her journey began at the edge of the whispering woods. The mist was thicker here, and the usual paths were gone. Fear pricked at her. She wanted to turn back, to gather guards and supplies. Then she remembered Elias's words. She closed her eyes, clutched the stone, and asked herself, what is the very next step? A gentle breeze stirred a single, shimmering leaf, pointing toward a barely there trail between two ancient oaks. It wasn't the grand entrance she expected, but it was a step. She took it. This became the rhythm of her quest. The path was not a straight line. It led her to a rushing river with no bridge. Instead of despairing, she walked the bank, trusting. She soon found a fallen log, slick with moss but wide enough to cross. She needed to help an old woman whose cart was stuck in the mud, delaying her by a day, but the woman in gratitude gave her a pouch of dried herbs that later helped her soothe a fearsome-looking, but secretly terrified griffin blocking her way. The griffin, once calmed, showed her a hidden passage through the lower peaks of the Shadowfen Mountains, saving her weeks of treacherous climbing. Every time she felt lost, every time the mist swirled and the path vanished, she would stop. She would hold the stone, quiet her frantic thoughts, and look for the one, small, next right thing. Sometimes it was sharing her bread with a hungry fox. Sometimes it was waiting out a storm in a cave instead of pushing onward. Sometimes it was just taking a moment to rest. She learned that trusting was not a passive waiting, but an active listening. And obeying was not a blind compliance, but a courageous action based on that trust. Each small act of obedience, each step of faith, cleared the mist just enough for her to see the next. The journey was not about her being a great, heroic princess. It was about her becoming the person who could trust in a guidance greater than her own sight. Finally, she stood before a vast, grey chasm. On the other side, nestled in a rock alcove, she could see a faint, warm glow the Sunstone. But there was no bridge, no path, nothing but a terrifying drop into the swirling mist below. All her progress, all her small steps seemed to have led to an impossible end. Despair, cold and heavy, washed over her. This was it. She had failed. She sank to the ground, the gardener's river stone feeling cold and useless in her hand. She had trusted. She had obeyed. And it had led her here to a dead end. She wept, her tears falling onto the dusty ground. But then, through her tears, she remembered Elias's final words, "Just look for the very next step." What could the next step possibly be? There was nowhere to go. She looked down at her feet, at the very edge of the abyss. There, nearly hidden by dust, was a small, carved symbol in the rock, a single, outstretched hand. It was an ancient marker. On instinct, she knelt and placed her own hand over it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a low grinding sound, a section of the cliff face shifted. It wasn't a bridge that appeared, but a single, narrow stone step, jutting out from the cliffside, leading into the empty air. It was terrifying. It looked fragile and impossible. Her mind screamed at her to stay put. But a quiet certainty settled in her heart. This was it. The next step. Trust. And obey. Taking a shuddering breath, Elara planted her foot firmly on the stone. It held. As soon as her weight was fully on it, another stone slid out from the cliff face just ahead of her, and then another. A bridge was forming, but only as she stepped onto it. She couldn't see the whole path, only the single step she was on and the one materializing just before her. She had to keep moving forward, into the mist, trusting that the next step would appear. With her heart pounding, she walked the invisible bridge, one step of faith at a time, until she reached the other side. There, bathing her in its gentle, golden light, was the Sunstone. It wasn't a huge, dazzling gem, but a smooth, warm stone, much like the one the gardener had given her, only this one glowed from within. As she picked it up, its warmth spread through her, a wave of pure joy and peace. And as she turned to look back, she saw the mist, the great grey sadness of her kingdom dissipating under the stone's light. The colours returned, first faintly, then vibrantly. The air cleared. She could hear the distant sound of birdsong. Her journey back was not on the hidden, winding path she had taken. With the Sunstone's light, the true, straight road was illuminated, and she walked home in its glow. When she returned to Ethelgard, the kingdom was celebrating. The people rejoiced, hailing their brave princess who had single-handedly saved them. But Elara knew the truth. She hadn't saved the kingdom. In the throne room, she found her father, and next to him, the gardener Elias. She walked to him and placed the Sunstone in his hands. "It was never about my strength," she said, her voice clear and strong. "It was about learning to walk when I couldn't see the path. It was about finding joy, not in reaching the destination, but in the simple, faithful journey. The real treasure was learning to trust, and then to obey." Elias smiled, his kind eyes twinkling. "And that, princess," he said, as the Sunstone's light filled the entire hall, "is a light that no mist can ever extinguish." The kingdom was safe not because a princess had found a magic stone, but because she had found a deeper truth, that when we trust in the goodness guiding us and simply take the next right step, we find our way through any darkness, and in doing so bring light to the world around us. Thanks for watching. If this story resonated with you, Please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it.
When we walk with the Lord in the light of His word, what a glory He sheds on our way. Let us do His good will. He abides with us still, and with all who will trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus, but to trust and obey. Not a burden we bear, not a sorrow we share, but our toil He doth richly repay. Not a grief or a loss, not a frown or a cross, but is blessed if we trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus, but to trust and obey. Then in fellowship sweet we will sit at His feet, or we'll walk by His side in the way. What He says we will do, where He sends we will go. Never fear, only trust and know.